Do I use this one? Nope. I'm here. Okay. It's been a while. So a lot of you know me, a few of you don't. It is a real privilege to be able to speak to you. This is a really special church, in case you didn't know. And I've been a member here, I think it's since 1996. Some of you remember my 29-year-old son, Mark, when he was a toddler. I was ordained here in 2004. And when I wasn't worshiping here, I've been serving churches around Southern California as a transitional minister. I'm married to Scott, who's hiding in the back there. And Scott has been telling me for years that I should write a book. And I did. I wrote a book. Thanks, Scott. As you know, that's a pretty common thing around IUCC. I am happy, though, that it's doing really well for a self-published book, and that means that some people other than my friends have bought it and read it. And that means that my friends liked it well enough to recommend it to their friends. So I feel good about that. But I do think that Scott should keep his day job. The book is called Eye of the Storm, Facing Climate and Social Chaos with Calm and Courage. And Scott will kindly sell you a copy after church over on the table there. And on the back cover, it says, "When things fall apart, you don't have to." And that's the topic of this sermon, and it's feeling kind of timely. The book comes out of my experiences over the last three years serving in an international online organization called the Deep Adaptation Forum. We support each other. We are discouraged climate activists, nature lovers, young people, sustainability professionals, human rights activists, and people with big hearts. So when people are anxious or despairing about things falling apart, I am the eye of the storm for them. In these online groups, I help make a calm space where they can catch their breath, get reoriented, and explore how to live, how to be of service when the world they got is not the world they signed up for. I don't try to fix anything. I don't tell them it's not that bad. I am a compassionate witness. I listen, and I trust that they can face what's happening without falling apart. Now, this is not a job that everyone wants to do. I'm weird that way. I enjoyed working in hospice, too. I know from experience that just bearing witness to somebody else's loss or struggle can make a huge difference. It can relieve anxiety. It can inspire courage. Our Stephen ministers know this, too. A lot of the suffering that people feel when things are falling apart comes from feeling alone, not being able to talk with somebody else about your troubles without feeling that they will judge you lacking or something. Holding your pain in private. See, in our culture, things are not supposed to fall apart. We're supposed to be progressing infinitely, right? Bootstrapping ourselves to success and happiness every time, or we might be labeled failures. So grief and pain are not publicly acceptable. People come to the gatherings that I host and express relief that they can say what's on their heart without being judged or dismissed. Some of my groups are explicitly grief circles, where we do ritual and share our griefs, any grief at the state of the world, because grief is a healthy part of processing loss. Sharing grief makes it less heavy to hold. And folks, this is biblical. In the prophets, in the Psalms, you'll find a lot of grieving. Even Jesus does his grieving. In today's scripture, we hear him declaring that those who suffer and struggle are blessed. Whatever else that famous passage means, we can know two things from this. Jesus expects that people suffer sometimes. It's part of our human experience. It's not wrong or bad. We're not wrong or bad when we suffer. And instead of judging us for not being happy and successful, God is with us in our suffering, somehow blessing us, though we don't exactly understand how. God is with us through it all, loving and sustaining us. But you know what? That's hard for someone to believe unless there's a human willing to show up and listen to them. And that is why, for me, being that eye of the storm, that calm place who listens to other people's struggle, that is holy work for me. And yeah, it can be hard work. I get to be in touch with my own pain too. And that's why I wrote a book about how to resource yourself to stay calm and centered in troubled times. You could be the eye of the storm for someone else, or you could have the tools to help yourself when trouble hits. So this book has a lot of tools to help you be the eye of the storm, and I'll lift up 3 of those. The first I've already been talking about, befriending grief. That's an interesting thought. Don't be scared of it. It won't eat you alive. It won't last forever. And don't be ashamed of it. It's right and proper to grieve what you love. Expressing grief over the state of the world right now? Yeah, that is right and proper. Honor your grief and don't carry it alone. The second tool is find stories that work. This was a really interesting one for me to explore. Life-giving stories and letting go of old stories that aren't working anymore. And the third tool is cultivating relationships of all kinds. So, the second tool for being the eye in the storm, finding stories that work. And by stories, I mean the cultural and personal lenses that define our reality. These stories tell us how the world works, how we should live, what we should value. And when we're in despair or confusion, it's likely that our stories that have given us meaning in the past no longer work. So it's time to let go of those failed stories and find some different stories that work. This is hard. It's easier to deny what you're seeing with your own eyes than to deny a story that has given you your identity. And that, my friends, explains a lot of really crackpot politics. So raise your hand if, after the murder of George Floyd, you have had to change your story about US history and politics. I'm glad I have some company. And I changed my story with the help of this church's diversity and inclusion book group. That helped big time. And now I grieve the ugly parts of our country's story that have been hidden, ignored, or censored. And I grieve my own loss of innocence. But my new story of American history, dark as it sometimes is, works. It works to explain the systemic racism that still binds us. And my innocence prevented me from understanding that systemic racism. So when I was writing the book, I started questioning a lot of my old stories and trying out new ones. And I might have radicalized myself. You can read the book and decide for yourself. But one new story that's working pretty well for me these days is simple. Things fall apart. That's the way the world works sometimes. It's not an ever-progressing improvement. Most things grow, mature, fade, and then die. So I don't have to panic. I don't have to frantically try to fix everything, because falling apart is what things do sometimes. I have to use my judgment and decide what I think I could fix. So, a national nonprofit that I love is failing. I don't have to blame anybody. Things fall apart. An elder relative had a health crisis. I didn't have to panic. I could just be with them. Knowing that these things are normal, I don't have to blame anyone or frantically fix the unfixable. I can just grieve and figure out what is mine to do in a situation of loss. I used to have some pretty powerful stories about activism. You can save the world, in so many words. I wanted to believe that. But now for me, you can save the world is a story that doesn't work anymore. Don't tell it to young people. Well, it's up to you to save the world. God, that's so cruel, because that thinking sets us up either to deny how hard and complicated things really are, or to despair that we can do anything useful at all. So I have been grieving the loss of my rose-colored activist glasses. But I refuse to feel guilty that I can't do the impossible. My aims are more humble now in activism, and I have a poem by my friend Laura Martin that speaks to me about what is in my power to do. Know today all you cannot repair, so that you are free for all you can. Let 100 things be undone, for you to do the one that matters most. Maybe you'll cross a stream and look for what lives in it. Maybe you'll cross the expanse of your spirit and look for what lives in it. Maybe you'll be there when the cardinal comes to drink, or the eyes of someone you love turn to your face. Maybe you'll grow something or harvest something. Maybe you'll make a stitch or let a prayer rise. These are no simple acts. This is your foundation. What we do matters, whatever the state of the world. There are no simple acts, because everything is connected to everything else. That is a life-giving story that I want to tell. And that brings us to the third tool for being the eye of the storm: cultivating relationships. All kinds of relationships with kindred souls. And here you are. With people who push our buttons and don't think like us. And here we are, praying to have the strength and wisdom to do that. And of course, we can cultivate our relationship with the sacred. And here we are. Let's soak in the power and presence and love that Jesus shows us, that gives us life, that never gives up on us. Claim it as a real force in your life, not an abstraction. Root yourself deeply in the sacred. However that works for you, however you conceive of it. Those deep roots will sustain you in stormy times. And we can cultivate other relationships with the non-human world, for instance. Now, that's not a thing I thought about much before I started this work, but it turns out a lot of ecological activists have really personal and vivid relationships with things in nature. It's not something Christians have paid much attention to. One person I know specializes in rocks. She just has a relationship with rocks. She can tell you all kinds of stories about them. Cultivating two-way relationships with non-humans, what do you think? Requires a little imagination on our part, right? But indigenous people, traditional people, have been doing it since time out of mind. And two-way relationships in which the other party is considered a person, a non-human is considered a person, that is the way that we know how to be in relationship and show respect. And if we did, our planet wouldn't be in the mess it's in now. So, my friend Emma Mary Gathergood, that's really her name, she lives in the middle of England, and she leads meditations on Zoom in our forum that she calls Earth Listening. Earth Listening is one of the places I've learned about being in two-way relationship with the non-human world. That's where I met my friend, the Rock Whisperer. Each week, Emma Mary chooses a different theme. She is a retired therapist, so there is that element of it. First, we check in with each other. How are we really? Grief and anger are allowed. Relationships come first over business. That's another thing I've been learning. And then Emma Mary invites us to explore a topic by being in conversation with Mother Earth about it. So we imagine going to a special place in nature, and I just walk out in my backyard to my native plant garden, and we talk on that topic to this special place that we've chosen. And then we just sit for 5 minutes and listen. Earth listening. We come back and report what we've heard. Reliably, we hear wisdom right for each person and love. Emma Mary likes to say, we know we love the earth, but remember, she loves you back and wants to help you. Earth listening feeds my soul. So, I invite you to consider, when you're up for it, being the eye of the storm for someone else. Anxiety is contagious, and we got plenty of that going around. But calm is contagious too, and courage is contagious. I invite you to join me in using the tools that will help you be the eye of the storm, befriending grief, being a compassionate witness, letting go of stories that have failed us, and telling stories that work, life-giving stories, including, of course, the stories from our faith. And I invite you in joining me to cultivate relationships, unlikely relationships, unconventional relationships, because we're all connected, and when we recognize it, that is a path forward, not to fix things, but to make amends for what we have lost through the heartlessness of our modern world. So, cultivating relationships with the non-human world. Sounds kind of crazy, right? Conversations with my garden. I confess, I do it. And it feels like belonging. It feels like coming home. Even if home is in rough shape sometimes, but actually after that August rain, my garden is the most glorious it's ever been. Our earth is a beautiful, miraculous, amazing home. And earth loves us and provides for us. So may we learn to love and respect her in return. Amen.